Right.
Which one?
I'd like to call to order this March 21st meeting of the Ascension Parish Council. At this time, if you'll please remove your caps and rise and remain standing for the pledge. That will be led, the pledge and the invocation, by Ken Dawson. Thank you.
Let us pray. Father, your grace is always sufficient. Your love is always abundant. Your truth, oh God, is apparent. So as we come tonight, we ask for your wisdom in doing this people's business. You said if anyone wanted to be great in your kingdom, let them become the servant of all. We thank you for the opportunity to serve the people of Ascension Parish. We ask that you bless this meeting tonight. Guide us in your wisdom. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Secretary, all of the members are present and accounted for. There is one chair's addition. With the consent of the body, I will move item 14 to item C7. Does anyone have any objection to that move? Hearing none, that passes. There is a public sign-in comment. If you would like to speak on an agenda item, please come forward, get a red or a green card, pay attention to the rules on the back of it, and then bring it forward to the secretary, who will submit them to us. If you would please do that as soon as you can, please, so that we can get those lined up and be able to make sure no one gets missed. Thank you very much. Item number 5 is a presentation by William Daniel, our infrastructure director. Mr. Daniel accompanied several of us to Washington earlier this month for the NACO conference, and we have asked him to summarize our efforts there. Thank you. William, great to see you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, council members. I have a slide presentation. It's only 42 slides, so it shouldn't take long.
Can you make it 5?
Well, I'm just going to kind of show you what's in there. I'm just going to kind of click through them. It's not going to take very long. There is a quiz at the end, however. This is the booklet that we took to Washington with us. It basically has the information that's in the slides. That wasn't in the slide. Yeah, that was, that's what we saw there. So the whole purpose of the trip was to meet with our congressman, and we had meetings with Garrett Graves, Ralph Abram, Bill Cassidy, Senator John Kennedy, and Congressman Richmond. And so what we did was we talked about Ascension Parish and about sewer, and we talked about the projects that we have going. We talked about road projects. Different road projects that we wanted to talk about. 3127, I kind of stopped here for a second because that one was got the most support by every delegation member that we met with. They were very helpful. They told us it was a very buildable road, that it was very key to economic development. It was key to safety. They were very high on the project. They're hoping that it will also tie into the West Bank Expressway sometime. So that project was very well received. We talked about some of the interchanges. LA 30, we discussed LA 30. There's things happening on all of these projects right now. We were able to get with them. They talked about some places where we could get some money, the build discretionary grants, the infra grants. We talked about drainage improvements. There's $1.2 billion of drainage improvements, and we put drainage improvements up to a 1. Each member of the delegation said this was squarely in the governor's office, and so that we needed to speak with the governor, but they would, help us whatever we had. This is the $1.2 billion in the federal flood control funds that we talked to. Also, I wanted to mention that Congressman Richmond promised to engage the railroad on our behalf, and he requested a bunch of pictures of all the problem areas and said he was going to meet with the railroad. He was very helpful. They all were very helpful in their own way, but this was a particular concern to a lot of the members, and he agreed to intervene on our behalf. So that's one of the views. And then the last, I said there would be a quiz. The quiz is who's buried here. This was a tour. It was the crypt of the Capitol, and it was actually reserved for George Washington, although he would not be buried there because he equated being buried at the Capitol to being like a king, and he was totally anti-British, and the new country that he helped found, he did not want there to be any aristocracy, so he refused to be buried there. But I think it was a very successful trip. We left a book or two with every single member of the delegation, and they were very helpful. They didn't make any specific promises, but they did promise to be, other than promising to be helpful. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Gentlemen, any questions? William, we thank you for being with us up there.
And what happened in Washington stays in Washington.
Particularly Aaron Lawler.
Ooh. It became quite obvious to everyone that I am terrified of heights. I mean, terrified of heights.
He is afraid of no man, but he is terrified of heights. Okay, moving on. Item number 6, the parish president's report.
As you may have heard today, Republic is quitting recycling. I just want to reiterate that we do recycling on Church Point Road at the maintenance barn, and that is from 7 to 4, Monday through Thursday, and on Saturday 9 to 1. If the volume picks up, we will stay open as much as needed. But the problem is everybody likes recycling, but the percentage that does it is very little. I wish everybody would recycle. So just to let y'all know that, we will step up hours and days if it is, if the volume picks up. I got a call from DOTD about the Sunshine Bridge. Saturday morning, eastbound, you're going to have 2 lanes. Westbound is going to be 1 lane till the middle of the summer to do maintenance on that side. And there's nothing we could, I asked them, anyway, can it be pushed up if you closed all and went with just 1 lane on the other side? And they said they looked at everything and there's nothing could be done other than that. And they're supposed to try to fix it, as soon as possible. But they said midsummer. But that's not good. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Item number 7, the consent agenda. Gentlemen, will you please read that, please?
Approval of GPS policy for Ascension Parish vehicles and equipment. Approval of contract with Sigma Consulting Group not to exceed $49,636 to develop 2 separate and distinct traffic calming policies for Ascension Parish arterials, collector roadways, and for subdivision roadways. Approval of contract with Sigma Consulting Group not to exceed $30,400 to assist in developing a qualification-based selection process for federal project approval. Amendment to renew geotechnical retainer contract APS $300,000 total shared among 3 consultants. Amendment to renew geotechnical retainer contract Gulf South Engineering $300,000 total shared among 3 consultants. Amendment to renew geotechnical retainer contract Arteman and Associates $300,000 total shared among 3 consultants. Approval to amend the contract with T. Baker Smith in the amount of $1,323,340 for completing the Stage 0 and Stage 1 work on the LA 3127 extension project as described in the scope. Approval of Shell Pipeline Company reimbursement agreement and proposal to extend the pipeline casing along the Roddy Road and Weber City Road Safety Widening Improvement Project. Renewal of sponsorship agreement with Coca-Cola Bottling Company United Gulf Coast LLC for Lamar Dixon Expo Center. Renewal of contract with Dr. Lisa Bailey, DDS, for dental services to Ascension Parish Jail inmates. Renewal of contract for medical services between Ty Gotro, FNP, BC, and Ascension Parish government to provide medical services to inmates at the Ascension Parish Jail. Total amount of contract is $49,500. Memorandum of Understanding between Ascension Parish government and Capital City Family Health Center, Inc., doing business as Care South Medical and Dental for the implementation of routine gynecological and obstetrical services for female inmates at Ascension Parish Jail. Renewal of professional services agreement between Henderson Auctions and Ascension Parish government to provide personnel, equipment, facilities, and services necessary for the disposal of property declared surplus by the Ascension Parish governing authority. Approval of change order number 1 of the contract for re-roofing of the Human Resources Building, Armory, and East Bank Courthouse Expert Maintenance Service, LLC, to increase the days for substantial completion from 60 days to 120 days. Approval of substantial completion for project re-roofing of Human Resources Building, Armory, and East Bank Courthouse Expert Maintenance Service, LLC. Contract request with General Informatics, Inc. for hosting of server, Fire District Number 3 in the amount of $30,000. Bid items to accept lowest responsive bid as follows. Janelle Street Driveway Project, Genesis 360 LLC, $32,650. Hot Mix Asphalt Truck Complete, Covington Sales and Service, $217,236. 6-yard dump trucks, approximately 2 units, Timmons Truck Center, $175,284. Approval of industrial tax exemption for BASF Project DARE. Approval of contract amendment for Myers Engineering not to exceed $249,000 for Phase 2 of the Lamar Dixon Expo Gymnasium expansion.
Thank you. Does any member of the council desire for the removal of an item from the consent agenda?
Yes, ma'am, I want to pull S to speak on.
Okay, item S is pulled. Mr.
Yes, I'd like to pull D and F, Madam Chair.
D and F have been pulled, so item D will become 7-1, item F will become 7-2, item S will become 7-3, and the chair will take up item 7-1. Amendment to renew a geotechnical retainer contract, APS $300,000, total shared among 3 consultants. This was a recommendation from the Transportation Committee.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
I need to recuse myself from the consent agenda because of item R with the ITEP for BASF.
Okay. So, Senator, I think we should vote on what remains on the consent agenda and then take up 7-1? Okay, the chair would entertain a motion.
Motion, Mr. Chair.
Have a motion by Councilman Cagnolati.
Second.
Have a second by Councilman Joseph to approve the consent agenda without the previous stated items. Are there any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Now, the chair will take up item 7-1 as previously stated.
Yes. I'd like to make a motion that we go out for a new RFQ. Based on the current contract that we have, we do have the option to request to go out for RFQ for new contractors, engineer.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilman Joseph, a second by Councilman Dawson to propose a new RFQ. Any questions? Mr. Kluwer?
Yeah, I would just, what's the reason for it?
The reason, once again, we haven't been using them, Mr. Kluwer, and so something must be wrong with them. We did go out for them, and they've been having a contract now for the last year and a half, and we haven't used them. So instead of just renewing them, just let's go out and see if we got a better deal on other engineering firm to see if we be able to use them.
I would just like some input from the administration.
Mr. President?
Anybody? UPW administration?
Well, I don't know anything about that company, but I mean, it's as y'all will if y'all want to do another RFQ on those 2 companies. I don't know if.
And on those projects, these are geotech for a lot of the road projects and things that we're having with the maintenance projects with the roads. We still have a geotech that's still be in place, so we don't expect any delays in anything and moving on with the project. It is up to the discretion of the council to pick a few others, so it shouldn't delay anything because we have one company that has proven to do a great job that will continue to be working on the project.
Good deal. That's what I just needed some kind of
Right.
reason.
So are there any objections to, on item 7.1, to an RFQ for that slot for APS?
Quick question.
Mr. Satterley?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I do not have an objection necessarily. I'm curious about the history of this company. When's the last time they worked for us? What did they do? Was that satisfactory? We're unhappy right now. It sounds like for sort of a, and with all due respect to my colleagues that want to change this tonight, it's sort of vague. I can't get my arms around it. Can you maybe, or can maybe you can help?
I know.
Submit.
No, Doc. Once again, yeah, they could submit on a new RFQ. That's not gonna.
Right, I understand they can do that, but I mean, they're not being in any way, I hate to use the word punished, unduly punished. I don't know anything about this company myself, but I'm curious, what have they done for us in the past? When did they do that? Was that successful?
Doc, they signed the contract in 2017, and it's 2019, and I have never seen them, from my research right now, have done anything for us.
So that's the answer, they haven't done anything, and just sitting out there in case we need them? Okay, I'm just trying to get information. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item 7.2 is amendment to renew geological retainer contract, Ardeman and Associates, $300,000, total shared among 3 consultants, was a Transportation Committee recommendation.
And once again, Madam Chair, my motion is to go out for a new RFQ for this engineering firm, not on this engineering, for the position, for the third engineering firm for geotech work for the parish.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Joseph, a second by Councilman Dawson, for a new RFQ for this consultant, Ardeman. Are there any questions? Mr. Kluot?
Yeah, once again, I got similar questions on the same thing is, I didn't want to prolong the other discussion, but the fact is, it was stated that they've been on retainer for years and have they been given something to do? Like we on the second one, have they been given something to do and they didn't do it? I mean, I'm trying to figure out where we at here. And what's the motive? Not that there's anything,
Mr. Dawson?
I see
So
nothing.
I looked at that,
DPW.
Randy, and one of the things is, it's a firm out of Florida. Why can't we find somebody that's closer to do that work, geotechnical work?
Good deal, I'm 100% with you, sir, and we'll look at that same term that you stated on the rest of everything. So, all right, I don't have a problem with that, but this, one of them is not out. I don't know if they're local, but I don't know if they're local with it. They might have a home office in Florida.
East Baton Rouge.
I was just wondering if transportation, anybody, somebody's got, is there some, did they not deliver or, or slow rolling on a project? I just trying to, they got their name on there somehow, somewhere.
Randy, they have originally they had 7 of them on that list.
Yeah.
So let's get that other company back to put a new package in, and hey, let's let the new transportation officer select from that.
Thank you, ma'am.
So we have Mr. Daniel, would you care to comment?
I was just going to say that we can certainly go out for RFQ. That's probably the fairest way to do it, obviously. Okay. I know both of the companies in question. I think they're good companies, but if they're good companies, they'll win the RFQ again. So I don't really see any issue in going out for the RFQ. We have one company that's still able to do the work, so it certainly wouldn't be a hindrance.
So just to make it clear, on my question, now that you've stepped to the podium, there's nothing against these companies. They haven't been requested to do something they didn't do or anything.
I wished I could comment on the work that they have done. I know them to be good companies. I don't know the specific work that they may or may not have done in Ascension Parish.
Sure.
But they're both good companies. But being good companies, if we go out for an RFQ, they'll certainly be competitive in the future.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Cluett. So we have a motion by Councilman Joseph, a second by Councilman Dawson. Any further questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 7.3, S, approval of a contract amendment for Meyer Engineering not to exceed $249,000 for Phase 2 of the Lamar Dixon Expo Gymnasium Expansion Recreation Committee recommendation.
Discussion.
Yes, Mr. Todd Lambert.
First of all, I wasn't aware that we had a Phase 2 of Lamar Dixon Gym expansion. And the second thing, when did this go to committee? Because it wasn't on the agenda as of Monday. It got put on the agenda Tuesday. We did not have a recreation committee meeting since then.
It went to committee in the last recreation committee they had.
Why wasn't it put on the agenda Monday?
It was overlooked.
Okay. That's all I have for now, but at the end of the, when it comes back up at the end of the agenda, I got some more to talk about, but, I'm just not, I've asked several people why we need another gym at Lamar Dixon. We have one there now. We use all the high school and elementary and primary gyms from the school board to, for basketball and other activities. And down the road, we'll talk a little bit more about this because I'm kind of upset that we're going to use close to $3 million. We're going to loan out of general fund to recreation to fund this gym, when I don't think the priorities right now. I think their priorities are for roads, and that's where the general fund money we use for roads. That's a road project for a year, $3 million. We could do a complete, which is $3 million going to be tied up for 10 years. We're going to be paying about $300,000 or so a year out of our recreation fund to fund this, which we already strapped. We got some major update on lighting on the 20 or so existing parks we have now. We have trouble keeping them up and keeping them up to date. Everybody goes to other parts of the country and they see nice parks and everything else. They come back, why we can't have this in Ascension? And we're striving to get our parks up to par, but it's taking every bit that we have in the budget to do so. But yet we're going to build this second gym, and no one has told me the need for it, because the school has been kind and letting us use all the gyms, school gyms, for recreational basketball. But I am with that, and I'm definitely against it, so I'm going to vote it down, and I'll talk a little bit more when it comes to the budget amendment.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Mr. Satterley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, I have a reasonable amount of appreciation for the councilman that just spoke, arguments, Madam Chairwoman. And we, of course, talked about this behind the scenes when I first saw it myself, because it was a bit of a red herring. It's been questioned in the media and so forth. So just want to be sure we're doing the right thing this evening. Is there some paperwork behind the scenes? It's not in our packet that would cover how this contract would be funded, as well as assume if we go forward and do the actual expansion, because that would be several $1 million, and then how it's going to be paid back, taken from what fund, gone to what other fund. I mean, this is an election year. We don't know who's sitting up here is going to be here next year or not, or maybe even the term after that, especially with what I'm hearing from our chair is that it would take maybe 8-10 years, correct around Terry, to pay this money back. So is there any paperwork like that could be shared tonight before we make this vote, or what number is it? I mean, Mr. Lambert keeps referring to.
It's behind the tab.
No, I have that. I'm talking about, he's referring to later on with the budget amendment we're going to be.
The budget amendment, the last item in ordinance we have to vote on. The gym is in that money, 2.5 million plus $380,000.
And is there in there, Mr. Lambert, or anybody, Mr. President, is there any paperwork saying how the funding mechanism is, where the money's coming from, how's it going to be paid back, what the time period is? I do realize, in talking to Madam Chair, rather than go out and bond the money, which I believe was the original idea, you got to pay interest. But if we take this money from existing funds in-house, we avoid that interest. So that could be a positive thing, et cetera, if the recreation group realizes that, as we all do, there's no dedicated funding for recreation, so they're funded at a certain level each year. I keep hearing the number, 2 million. So if you're gonna pay back, I don't know, 300,000+ a year, it's gonna take a lot of years to pay that back and so forth. So is that, just wanna be sure, is that what we wanna do here tonight?
Mr. Joseph?
And maybe I don't have all the facts correct, because I'm not sure what facts I have.
Doc, all the facts have been laid out. All the facts have been documented. We approved the budget based on this. And in the budget, based on I call it surplus fund, at the end of the year, wherever that surplus funds is, we have put 25% of that money will pay to repay the general funds of it. Normally, the 100% of it goes to sewage. In the last couple of years, we've been having a couple $1 million. So based on how conservative we have been in the past and the audit and all that, it won't take us 10 years to pay this back based on that 25%. So, I mean, we are taking surplus money that we've been using in the past and putting it 100% to sewage. And I do not want to get on the sewage subject since we're so concerned about budget and where the money being spent. So we approved that budget in November, I'm not mistaken. So this it's in black and white. Just apparently some of us have not read that black and white or did not know where to look for it at. But it's in there.
Madam Chairman, I accept the latter. If that comment was directed toward me, I only know what I have. And as far as looking and so forth, I guess I'm guilty as all of us. I'm on certain committees. We're all on certain ones. We probably could go and should go to all committee meetings, if not review them in films, et cetera. But I think another red herring now has just run up the flagpole. The idea that surplus funds is going to sewer, obviously as chairman of the utilities, and everybody knows that I'm making a large play toward bringing sewer to the parish of Ascension. Well, that might very well, and I think does, go into a priority issue, as Mr. Lambert has discussed about roads. I don't think he put sewer in the group, but he did mention roads, I think, and drainage, obviously, since the great flood of August 2016. As far as surplus funds, then also, okay, so we've got them, and that you made that clear, Madam Chairwoman, to me on the phone for this year. But are we going to have that every year for this undisclosed number of years, 10 years, 8, 7, 5, whatever it's going to be to pay it back? I don't know, and I don't know, are we making a decision for people, as I said, that are going to replace us, and would they be happy with it? And frankly, I'm kind of surprised the public's not speaking tonight. Are they happy with it? If the public tells me they want to expand this gym over using that money for other purposes that might, in their mind, have a higher priority, sewer, roads, drainage, whatever, that's fine as well. But I have no handle on that tonight, so it is a difficult vote for me.
One other thing, yeah.
May I would like to address the Recreation Committee Chairman, if he would like to discuss to some degree briefly what the necessity is for the gym in your opinion.
Well, we went over this multiple times in the Recreation Committee, so I really don't feel the need to keep hashing back and forth over the same argument with Councilman Lambert over this. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Lambert?
Yeah, as far as black and white, if this was put in the budget last year, which it may have been, it wasn't line item for a gym. It probably was in there for 2.5 million for recreation or something like that. Wasn't black and white, by the way. But if it was in the budget last year, why are we coming back tonight to amend the budget?
Well, Dawn can answer.
Dawn, would you like to address that, please?
Good evening. So in your budget book that you all adopted, there was a list of projects, and at the end of the year, when we adopted the budget, we weren't quite sure exactly which projects would be done. The $3 million was transferred from Sales Tax District Number 1 in the budget amendment, in the budget for the 2019 budget, $3 million to recreation, with the understanding that recreation would pay back 10%, $300,000 a year, just principal, because it's basically your general fund loaning it to yourself. So there's no interest to be charged. Once the recreation committee and administration figured out exactly which projects they wanted to do, that's when the specific line items are being amended in the budget. But the revenue was already budgeted, the $3 million. But just not necessarily, we had some ideas, but the specific projects were not outlined until right now with the budget amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One other thing was the 25% surplus. I don't know if y'all been in a lot of the fields, and Dempsey probably can answer this. We have a lot of updated lighting that we have to do, which is very costly. Like I say, our budget is slim. We have 20 parks. We have a couple water parks that the water bills at the water parks in the summertime are over $2,000 a month, just water bills. So the funding that we have in recreation is taking everything to keep up what we have now. If we get some surplus, we need to upgrade our parks, our existing parks, before we add a gym that no one can tell me yet why is it gym needed. We have a second gym. We have, by the way, the gym that's at Lamar Dixon, we just 2 years ago spent over $300,000 on upgrading it to anywhere from 300 plus thousand to upgrade the one that's there now. And I'm all for recreation. I'm the youngest of 11. All my siblings play ball. I have grandkids that play ball at all the facilities. Definitely for recreation. But guys, we have to live with what we have to work with, and we want to keep up what we have. And if money comes available down the road, maybe so. But right now, I don't see it. And the priority in roads, if everybody you talk to trying to get through the Ascension Parish right now, traffic-wise, road is our #1 priority behind sewer. And we're gonna tie up close to $3 million for 10 years that could be spent on roads, because we can use general fund or road fund.
This is one point, Councilman Lambert. I don't recall you making this argument when the soccer fields were getting done. So what's the difference between the soccer fields and the gym? Because you didn't say anything.
Yes.
No, you did not.
Yes, I did.
No, you had no problem with allocating the money for those soccer fields. But now, when it's a gym, you have a problem with it. So why?
I got a point with that.
Gentlemen, let's,
Yeah, this is just a comment, and it's not gonna be addressed at, I'm not gonna address it to any councilman. I'm not that way. I don't work that way.
Well, I don't want to be a misunderstanding when I make my comment. Mine is
But-
addressed directly at you.
I'm understanding from a previous, and this is coming from a reliable source, that this was promised, if the soccer fields get built, you'll get your gym built. This was a deal cut back in the day.
Well, I don't know anything about that deal,
Okay.
but please tell me why you weren't opposed to the soccer fields.
I was opposed to the soccer fields.
Do you recall making this
all
argument?
right,
here?
gentlemen,
I did-
that's enough,
I
that's
did
enough.
vote for it at the end, 'cause
That's enough.
I can tell you why,
Todd.
wait a minute, one question. Why I supported the soccer fields, they came to us and sold it to us where we were gonna get funding back, where it was a no-lose situation for us. They were gonna.
And what
with
follow-up have you done? What
What
follow-up have you done? Because you're a fiscal eagle. What follow-up have you done?
I have followed up. We haven't gotten any funds.
Gentlemen, all
That
right,
was gonna
gentlemen,
come-
that's enough.
That is
So we
brought
can
up.
take this
Why
to
are
the-
we not getting funds that we were supposed to get from the soccer
Gentlemen.
association?
Gentlemen, you can take, this is a discussion that needs to be had in sidebar. Councilman Law.
I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, part of what I see with this gym is, and I know we've talked about other fields needing maintenance, a lot of things need maintenance in the parish. The lack of maintenance in the parish didn't start a year ago, 5 years ago. I mean, this has been decades. You know, these fields have been falling apart for 20 years. We haven't done anything. But what we also haven't done for recreation is we are expecting, based on every model I've seen, about 50,000 more people in this parish by 2030. Have we even looked at how can our recreation handle that? Have we ever taken a step and said, what do we need when we have that many more children, that many more elderly, that many more individuals that just want to go out and participate in something? Because I can tell you, my kids played AYBA basketball, and we had to go on every day, travel from gym to gym, from Santa Ma to Dutchtown. In one day, two different areas, And it's a burden on the families of this parish. We have an opportunity to tell the families of this parish that they can go play in one area all day. Your husband and wife, your grandparents don't have to split up because you've got more than one child. We constantly fail to plan for the future. We don't look ahead. We don't think of all our needs. The only needs that a parish has are not roads and sewage. We have prioritized roads. Move Ascension is getting more work done than has been done in decades. Clearly, and you're going to start seeing the orange barrels within the next 6 months. But just like a human body, you have to take care of the whole thing. Recreation is not roads, it's not drainage, it's not sewage, but it's important. We just took away, and it's a shame. It's easy to talk about I'm for recreation. It's different to put your money where your mouth is and do something about it. There are a lot of opportunities out here that we can improve our recreation. I was talking to a family last week, telling them about this gym, and they were thrilled because they were about to travel down to Thibodeau for a volleyball tournament. Stay in a hotel for the weekend. We see it all the time. We'd like to start bringing those people in. This past weekend, we had the Jambalaya Cup, 83 teams. Soccer from Mississippi, North Louisiana, staying in hotels, eating in the restaurants. I was at the Cracker Barrel that morning, and it was packed with families paying taxes in Ascension Parish. This is an opportunity to bring more taxes into Ascension Parish from people, not you and I. We pay them already. I'm talking about bringing people in from other communities, other dollars that we wouldn't have. This is an opportunity. But recreation isn't just about bringing taxes in. It's about giving people a better way of life, giving people an opportunity. And you want to talk to employers? Talk to employers what it costs to get somebody to come into Louisiana and work. They have to pay them more, especially in Ascension Parish and St. James. There was a study done on that because we don't have not just recreation. We don't have everything that some of these other parishes have, and we're starting to build that. These employers want that. They want to be able to bring a person in to work in this parish and have that person want to stay here and not move away, and then they have to hire somebody else. So this is more than just, hey, let's go build a gym. We've had 20 years, and we've watched our recreation and our fields fall apart and haven't done anything about it now. And now it's like, oh, we got to do something about it. 20 years has passed. We haven't done what we need to do. We're doing that right now. Our recreation department is improving the fields. We're fixing the lights. But if we sit pat and do nothing and don't look at expanding recreation for the future, when you have 50,000 more people in this parish, we're going to be right back where we are 10 years from now. That's why we're doing this.
Thank you, Councilman. The chair would entertain a motion on this issue, which is not
Motion.
yet been. I have a motion from Councilman Lawler.
Second.
Second by Councilman Turner. Is there any further discussion? Yes, Mr. Satterley.
Yes, and thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I was hoping I'd get a second turn, Robert's rules. The gentleman from District 7 posed two interesting questions I find tonight. One of them was, what do we need, if I'm quoting this correct, in recreation? And the other was a follow-up along the same lines. Have we ever taken a step in recreation? I believe we have. In fact, we did. It was called Better Recreation Now, and it failed miserably at the ballot box. That tells me at least most of the people in this parish don't have that, unfortunately or fortunately, I guess it depends on which side of this fence you want to be on, as a top priority. So the priority argument of Mr. Lambert I find continuing to be somewhat compelling. In fact, you know this, Madam Chair, in our conversations before the meeting of today, I came in tonight fairly prepared to vote in the affirmative. But I do find the arguments of Councilman Todd Lambert to be compelling, along the lines of priority. And I'm not against recreation. People say, well, Doc, please forgive the French, you're 70, almost 70 years old, you're an old fart, you don't care. I got soccer moms in my district just like we all have. And I have great respect for the children and so forth. But when the councilman says, let's put our money where our mouth is, I think we have, just by virtue of the counter argument from the other councilman, we have 20 parks. And yes, they're run down. So is that another priority within a priority? If we're not taking care of that, do we need, I think it's an interesting question, to be expanding this gym? And again, I'm not against one sport either or another one. I quite frankly, believe it or not, I may not look it, but I played all of them, not in any way organized at a school level, but in Sandlot. I loved, when I was a child, to play baseball. I loved to play basketball. And in the particular parish I lived back then at school age, I readily made use of the facilities, both in Orleans originally and then later in Jefferson Parish. And they were, quite frankly, top-notch. It is indeed unfortunate that we have let it run down, but I'm wondering, so when do we ever find the money to fix that? Or do we just keep expanding other things and then have even more maintenance with that? So with all that said, Madam Chairwoman, and with all due respect, all the folks, you know, without naming names, 2 councilmen to my right, 2 to my left, we know who they are. They've just spoke multiple times each. I find myself unable to support this evening, and I thank everyone for listening.
I have a motion by Councilman Lawler, a second by Councilman Turner. Madam Secretary, I need a roll call, please.
Press the button.
Just press the button. Thank you very much. The vote is yes, 8, and 3 no. There were no abstentions. The yeas have it. That motion passes. Thank you all for the healthy discussion. Item 7.4 is the movement of item number 14 in order to get the folks from Leadership Ascension out of here before we move along to some more lengthy items on the agenda. So that is a cooperative endeavor agreement between the Parish of Ascension, the City of Gonzales, and Leadership Ascension to begin a public awareness campaign to make necessary improvements to the baseball field located on Irma Boulevard to an all-abilities field and to authorize the use of the field if the funds are raised. Parish President Matassa and Leadership Ascension. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. We appreciate y'all's time this evening. My name is Erica Page. I'm with the class of 2019, Leadership Ascension. I'd like to introduce my team members if we have a second for that. This is Ashley Woodard. Wooders. Bradley Ward, Bridget Marino, Roosevelt Vessel, and Lynette Erlinson. And then our group mentor, Miss Jackie Tisdale, is also here with us tonight. So we really appreciate y'all's time. We are, as I mentioned, part of Leadership Class of 2019. Many of you that may be familiar with leadership know that there is a component of that class where you're broken into smaller groups, and you're given the task of creating a community service project that you feel would both serve the community in great need, but also have longevity to last and serve the community for years to come. So our group certainly feels like we have hit a grand slam with our group project for the community. And so we've met with President Matassa and his office a couple of times, as well as Mayor Arsenault. And we've came up with the great plan to convert the current T-ball field on South Irma Boulevard into an all-abilities baseball, softball facility. This would serve the parish as a whole, any child who was listed or had any type of special need, both those with physical disability and those with maybe developmental or mental delays. So whether they may be on the autism spectrum and aren't able to participate in a regular team sport with what we consider our average children, this facility would now allow for that. So we this evening particularly are requesting two things. That's a vote of support from you all to be able to pursue this project. And then the second portion of that is before our leadership class comes to an end, that we would have the ability to use the facility as its current condition for an awareness event that we would end the season with. That event would allow us to obviously draw attention and awareness to the need of a facility like this in the parish, and then also the ability to raise funds, whether it be through silent auction donation there or whatever it may be.
Motion.
I have a motion by Councilman Cluott, a second by Councilman Dempsey Lambert to approve this,
Discussion.
and we have some discussion.
Okay.
Councilman Lawler.
I don't like that idea. No, I'm teasing.
It's an interesting topic to follow,
I was
right?
the irony cannot be lost on anyone here. It's fantastic. What is the estimated cost on that?
So we've done our homework. We've spoken, I believe in y'all's packet today, you have both a copy of the cooperative agreement and then also our vision package. So if you turn,
Oh, but did not go far enough.
you'll see a rendering on page 4. If you turn to the next page, we have itemized budget on page 5. So the cost, the items you see highlighted, the items you see highlighted are those that we have already received commitment on in in-kind donations. As soon as I tell you about this budget, we have a great little video to play for you that Quality Engineering and Surveying, who's done our, well, it's playing, who's done our rendering work, has provided us with.
This is beautiful.
So this is the current facility, and then what the vision is to bring it to.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I've coached many years on this field.
Great.
We're talking about the one right down the road here.
Yes, sir.
What did we do with the children? We putting them at the other T-ball fields, or what's going on?
So actually the only time that the field itself would be out of commission is during the construction phase. The field itself can still be played on by other league teams. It's just no metal cleats, right? And for T-ball, they're wearing tennis shoes generally anyway.
Okay.
So it would truly serve the parish as a whole, but give those with special needs an ADA compliant facility to also be able to play in a seasoned sport. As we know, here in Ascension Parish, Special Olympics is huge. There's great turnout and support for that. And it's a wonderful thing that it allows those children with special needs. The component that Special Olympics nationwide doesn't offer is for those children to be part of a seasoned team. If you turn to the very last page of our packet, we have a letter of support from the Special Education Director of Ascension Parish School Board. She really, she's really behind this and full support of how they can be an advocate for this project as well. We all know that when our child signs up for a team and putting on that uniform and having a snack with their colleagues or teammates afterwards, there's so much camaraderie that is able to be built in them, confidence, skills that these children don't have an opportunity to grow and develop, and this would allow that for them.
Currently the only field like this that I know of in the Baton Rouge area is over at Traction, Cypress
So Traction
Mountains.
has one, and actually Livingston Parish, a leadership group a few years ago created the same project.
Okay.
Now it takes quite a length of time because it is a hefty budget. We're not planting a tree, right? We're wanting to build a field and help their dreams come true. So we realize that the longevity of the project is a bit longer. But when we think of the kids in our parish and not having to leave to go elsewhere, one thing is if you have a T-ball game on a Tuesday night, it's hard for those parents to travel into Baton Rouge to Traction or to Livingston Parish so that they can be part of that league. So we do feel like there is a deficit in terms of what our recreation here in the parish is able to offer. We've spoken with some parents who have multiple children, and so they have some children who are able to sign up and play ball, and then whatever the delay may be or the physical disability, they have that one or other children that aren't able to, and that's a very bittersweet thing. So, when we think of the vision of what it can be and how even those children could have their family and siblings come out and support them, every child deserves that opportunity, and we feel it's not present in the parish, but certainly capable of being here.
Councilman Cluott.
Yes.
I want to thank you guys for being here. I know most of you guys, but within Leadership Ascension, there's been some great projects come forward, and I'm going to tell you, this is one for the books, okay?
Thank you.
Great vision. Like you said, you're not planting a tree. And just a rough budget of $700,000. And one of the good things about it is there's plenty of opportunity for corporate sponsorship.
Right.
From,
Our goal.
From business
to speak to that is we would love to have individual engraved bricks where families that may want to support this could do so at a monetary minimal donation and certainly feel like it's part of they're part of that big dream as well. And then with the industries we have here in the parish, corporate sponsorship is a large part of our plan. And then also applying for a few grants that we've identified that this project meets specifically. There's a Cal Ripken Foundation grant that helps facilitate these types of fields specifically. And then also through the Lieutenant Governor's office, there's the Land and Water Conservation Fund.
Right.
We get those acronyms messed up a little sometimes, but that's what it is. And when we read the intent of what types of projects that particular grant funds, it's as if it just said Field of Dreams on the paper. So we have great intent to, with your approval, be able to move forward and apply for both of those.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Cagnolotti.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Again, I echo Randy's comments. Thank y'all for coming. We have a special needs granddaughter, and my daughter Stacy was very active in Project Kids Cove, which resulted in Kids Cove Discovery Park. A monumental achievement because the nearest one at the time was in Mandeville. Now we have it in Gonzales, and believe me, it's being utilized by Ascension Parish and like 7 or 8 surrounding parishes. My granddaughter was involved in one of these baseball tournaments. They had to go to Baton Rouge for one, and then they had to go to Mandeville for another one. I applaud you. I support you, and I think this is a wonderful idea to recognize special needs kids. They need a place to play, and that's what we're getting. Thank you.
We appreciate that. I would like to point one thing out to you all. So we've researched these types of leagues and how their development is within the communities they serve. And a great portion of that, which we really all felt very passionate about, is that they incorporate what they call a buddy system. So if you have a child in a wheelchair who it's difficult for them to get from first to second base, there are other children or young adults, whatever it may be, that can volunteer for this league. Let's say that your kid plays on a team and Tuesday night is an off night. So his coach could say, on Tuesdays, we're going to be buddies for this particular league. And so what they help them do is after they're able to hit the ball, they will wheel them to first base or whatever it may be, help them get around the field. And then, of course, we have some of those children who physically they can hit the ball just fine, right, off of a tee or what have you, but they get a little disoriented or maybe confused as to what do I do next. And so that buddy is able to stand on the first baseline and cheer them on and rally them to come that way to help them continue the game. So what we really feel it does is it's not only all-inclusive, but it allows us with our children to break the barrier of feeling like we're different at all. I think when you play with someone, you realize, well, they just maybe look a little different or have a maybe different restriction, but we like the same things. And I think that in the long run, that really helps build their character and develop our community as a whole more unified. So,
Mr. Johnson.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a recommendation. We put an item on the agenda for finance to consider contributing to this.
I second that.
Fund.
I have a motion and a second. Are there any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
thank you.
Right, and now we'll need a motion. We have a motion and a second. We need a vote to support this endeavor. Any opposition? Hearing none, that motion's granted.
Thank you all.
You very much. Great job. Now we will go back to committee recommendations. The Strategic Planning Committee recommendation chaired by Oliver Joseph. Item 8A, discussion and approval of proposed revisions to Appendix 5 of the drainage work. And I do have a speaker, if you'll give me just 1 second. Mr. Pettit, Mr. Jeff Pettit.
Good evening, council members. I'm glad to see this on the agenda tonight. It's another step for this council to take to foster and encourage and require responsible development, infrastructure-driven development in the parish that'll protect every citizen, new and old. I was disappointed that it took 10 months to bring it to a meeting and a vote, but it didn't take as long as impact fees took to get before this council, nor revised traffic studies. This is a step in the right direction to protect every citizen of Ascension Parish. We're going to hear, we might hear, y'all have probably heard that this is going to drive developers out of our parish and slow growth down. Impact fees didn't slow growth down. Revised traffic studies didn't slow growth down. This will not slow growth down. What it will do with a 3-foot limit on fill, what it will do is change the way we build. And the way we build now is not responsible, and this is a step towards responsibility. And I would ask you all to please implement these recommendations, best practices by the engineers that were contracted to do this study. Implement them for the citizens of Ascension Parish, the ones that are here now and the ones that we all know are still going to come to Ascension Parish. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So at this point, I would ask Sean, Chereau, and Melissa to come forward. Excuse me, I have a motion. Mr. Dawson?
Yeah. Well, we can get the questions, but I'd like to make a motion that we move this forward to legal counsel for drafting of an ordinance to be introduced at the next meeting. I would like to also add to that we hold at least one public meeting before it's up for consideration to allow for further input and for this matter.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Dawson and a second by Councilman Satterley that we move this forward to legal counsel to become ordinance, to put in ordinance form, and that in doing so we hold at least one public meeting for public input prior to the vote. Do I have a motion and a second? Are there any questions? Mr. Clinton?
Yeah, I just got a quick question on the public meetings. So it would, you saying at least one public meeting. You talking about a regional meeting, parish-wide meeting in one place here?
Well, I was thinking about perhaps
at this meeting, or?
No, I was thinking about a separate meeting, perhaps in a governmental building like we've had before, and allow people to receive input from the public on that.
That's I was just wondering, how you talk.
Thank you for that motion and second, gentlemen, and that question. Any other questions?
Madam Chairwoman?
Yes, Mr. Satterley.
Yes, thank you. So if this motion passes, is it more appropriate tonight to look at some final edits to both the drainage impact study and the Appendix 5 in the Unified Land Development Code that covers our floodplain management tonight? Or would it be the chair's pleasure that we do that at either the special meeting after the ordinance is drafted? Because there's many more steps. Obviously, we'll have to have an introduction and a public hearing of the same and so forth. So are we, and along that lines, again, in a conversation we had today, I indicated, or yesterday maybe, I indicated to you and other councilmen copied that some of these edits weren't talked about, and I believe you said you were going to check with both Melissa, with HNTB, and with Mr. Fournier in our planning department about some of these final issues.
It would be the chair's pleasure that we have workshops with all those folks that you mentioned in this same time period, so that including Melissa and Sean and Mr. Fournier and members of the council, so that and our legal counsel. It would be my pleasure that we will do those workshops in order to make sure we fully understand the impacts of what we are proposing, and that we get this right. And there's not a whole lot of room for error here.
Very fine, thank you.
So, Mr. Kluwat?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm just looking at that time frame. Do we have that time frame between Mr. Dawson's motion to bring it back?
So you got a month.
Huh?
We have a month. So you got in 2 weeks it'll be introduced, and then the next 2 weeks it'll be up for consideration. So we have a month to have the the public meeting. I would assume that the public meeting would be sometimes after the introduction.
Yeah, I just thought you'd said next council meeting.
To bring it back for introduction at the next council meeting?
Good deal.
So that's.
Clearing
yeah.
that up.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I agree that we have a
Because
month,
yeah.
which I think gives us time to have some workshops, to also have legal take a real good look at any proposal that we have or the final proposal that we have, and to hold at least one public meeting. I mean, it may be necessary to hold more than one.
Maybe more than one. As we've seen on other subjects that one don't cover it.
Right, absolutely. So we have some, I'm sure that each member of the council probably, perhaps, has some questions tonight. I certainly know that I do. So I would like to ask Sean and Melissa if they would please come up. I'm going to begin, I'm just going to take chair's privilege here and ask a couple of questions, or some questions that I have found myself laboring over in the last few days. I know that we have spent a considerable amount of time and money studying, and I think what we have is a fair and reasonable ordinance. But I am concerned about how we came to the 3-foot fill limit, and if that would be considered arbitrary. So if either of you wants to comment on that first question, I would appreciate it.
Sure. This is Melissa Kennedy from HNTB. I will comment on that. When we were originally contracted to look at the ordinances, just to do a preliminary review, what's going on with them, how could we make improvements? In the ordinance, you already have a 3-foot fill limit, but there were some conditions in there that were allowing that ordinance to be interpreted as more than 3 foot of fill. So we took that and put the 3-foot maximum on it and put the requirements in order to meet that 3-foot maximum, a little bit more detailed in order to meet that requirement. So that was the basic intent of that. Where the original 3-foot came from originally that was in there, I do not know.
Okay, thank you. Sean, do you have anything to elaborate on that?
No, I think Melissa said that perfectly.
Okay, so I'll continue. So having established, and I understand now where the 3-foot came from, having established that, and now establishing that throughout the parish, what consideration was given to the varying conditions that exist in the numerous drainage basins in the parish? Do you consider this a one-size-fits-all approach, and do you think that's best practice?
Well, mostly the requirement is going to be most impacted in areas of the floodplain, because in the areas in the floodplain where you fill, you have to mitigate for that fill. And so there are requirements in order to meet that mitigation. And where you can't fill above 3 feet, then you have to accommodate by changing in your building construction. So there will be some concessions that need to be taken in order to meet those requirements. But I think I don't know that you want to start saying we can do this here, we can do that. That would probably need further study. And part of what we were going to be looking at were all the different watersheds within the parish eventually to see, and that could be addressed at that time.
Sean, would you like to elaborate?
Once again, I think Melissa's perfectly answering that.
Thank you very much. So, a question for Jerome or Sean. After the last Strategic Planning Committee meeting, I asked about some language, which I apologize for struggling through that meeting trying to get to the same question, that would allow some flexibility for small commercial entities not covered by our homeowner exceptions. I got some language today from Jerome, and I sent it back to him and said, I'm more confused than ever now. So do we have some language that while we removed it in its entirety, offering some flexibility to the engineering review agent, do we have some language that would help us to where we do not have exceptions for homeowners, or where we do have exceptions for homeowners and we do not have exceptions for any small commercial? Do we have any, is there something we can do to help those folks so that they are not burdened by these expensive drainage studies that are not necessary.
Madam Chairman, if I might address that?
You certainly may, sir.
Yeah, thank you. And excuse me for sitting here.
I understand.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. One of the things that we were considering is that in the draft that came before us for the policy, we had eliminated the very last paragraph of that policy, which eliminated the ability of the ERA to make exceptions for certain studies. Everybody is subject to the drainage ordinance, including very small commercial operations. The problem is that if we allow them to move forward and they have to produce the same type of drainage study that the big players do, it's a very expensive process. So what Sean and I have done and looked at is that how do we make it a little easier for them to produce the documentation that allows us to analyze the drainage impact that they're going to have and outlines the mitigation that they need to provide for their small project. So what we'd like to do is decrease the amount of information that they have to give. A lot of it's extraneous because of the size of the project. And let's say that we limit it to a half-acre size or something along that. We would provide some kind of threshold, right? What we would allow them to do is provide a little less information, not as extensive as the big players who's putting together a 200-unit subdivision, but allow them to provide us enough information to where we can give them feedback as to what type of mitigation they need to provide. Everybody, all commercial projects have to mitigate the drainage, right? And I don't think that we as a parish want to get away from that policy. But the issue is how much information do we need from these very small developers in order to make that decision, all right? And I can let Sean expand on that a little bit, but that was the purpose of the language that we provided you today, all right?
Thank you.
And it was a little wordy, I agree, and we might be able to condense that a little bit, but I think that was the intent of it, right?
Thank you. It made sense. It just, I was more confused after.
Okay.
Go ahead, John.
Yes, I don't know if there was confusion before, but I just want to make sure it's very clear. Everyone in the ordinance in the parish if you're doing development, and development's defined in the drainage ordinance, they're required to follow the Ascension Parish drainage ordinance. There never is an intent at an ERA level to say that you're able to get out of the requirement of the drainage ordinance. That's very clear. Fill mitigation, detention requirements, don't make adverse impact to your neighbors upstream, don't block the stream, don't get in the way, account for your neighbors in all directions, don't impede flow, all of those things, that's drainage ordinance. That's the foundation of the drainage ordinance. Now, what it takes to show proof that's sufficient for the parish, that's where I call that submittal requirements. What's required to submit for that particular project to show the ERA and to provide sufficient documentation to put into the files for the parish. If questioned by the adjacent landowner, how did you all allow that? Why did you all allow that? We have all that information right here in your files. That's the role of the ERA, make sure there's sufficient information. And we rely on engineering judgment. Obviously, as an ERA, I never wanted to ever get into the point of saying, let's talk to Sean, let's see what rules we can get out of it. I want them always to be the exception. It's because legally, it's just a whole lot easier to say the ERA say, I'm treated you the same way as everybody else. But now that we're pushing this drainage policy to be, making it crystal clear, adopted by the council and all that, my concern would be people would read the drainage policy submittal requirements as black and white. For example, watershed map, 2-foot contours. If I have a small commercial site and they're not big enough to represent a watershed map, I can use engineering judgment. This type of map is sufficient that you had from whatever project. It was 3-foot contours. I have the flexibility. I know what they're meeting the intent of the ordinance. Actually, they're satisfying the ordinance, and that's a sufficient submittal requirement. I just want to make sure the ERA or in-house drainage reviewers of DPW always have that little bit of flexibility in making sure in the submittal requirements that it takes to show that you're meeting the intent of the ordinance. So there's the language that we're proposing that we consider would be in the drainage procedure, where this says the ERA, at the discretion, case-by-case situation, may allow you modify or deviate from some of the submittal specifics as long as you're satisfied with the drainage ordinance. In no way is this to be considered a variance to the requirements of the ordinance. So there's two things, ordinance and there's what you got to submit to show that you're meeting the ordinance. That's where we think we need a little bit of wiggle room, and that's what historically we've had on just the little things in the drainage studies.
So I would suggest that we talk about that in workshops.
Yes.
So that all of us can be comfortable with that, and so that we can share with you our concerns around that.
And also may add, you also need a little bit of flexibility for the ERA, whoever, to ask for above and beyond. If we start turning this black and white, there are some projects where we'd say, thank you, but because of what's going on, I need you to do this above and more. I need you to go more upstream or downstream. I need you to analyze the adjacent thing. And someone can say, wait a minute, there's no wiggle room. It's not in your policy. I don't see where you can ask me for it. I didn't budget for it, didn't plan for it, so you can't ask me for it. There just needs to be a little flexibility in what needs to be submitted.
Very good. I think I have a couple more questions here. Let me see. So I just want to make clear, I do not believe it is not that we can do nothing. I am satisfied that doing nothing would not be appropriate. And I'm not unsatisfied, as many of us I think are not, with the 3 foot. But I do have some questions, I think, that are more of a legal nature around that issue. And I want to make a statement that I do not believe that this should be our final product. I really think that whatever we do going forward, we're going to have consequences, unintended and intended, and that we are going to have to refine this ordinance over time. Would you agree with me?
Yes.
Thank you. So, O'Neill.
Yes, ma'am.
In your research, how do other parishes, do they limit by fill feet, or do they limit by zone, by district? Do they do something entirely different? What is your research on?
Researched multiple parishes. Even I went to the areas that generally have flood issues, and the way they do it is in Baton Rouge, Lafayette, all those areas, Calcasieu, and all those areas around there. And even I went to the city of Houston because they've had flood issues and everything like that. They have what they call a net zero fill, which means it's not a number, it's a net zero fill, and if they're in a 100-year floodplain, they must, it's at zero. Or the other way to do it is where they've done specific studies and have specific basins, and they determine it's based on wherever they are. You know, it's not a number across the board. It's either net zero fill or you do it by basins. Caddo, they have an ordinance that specifically says you have basin studies. St. Tammany Parish's drainage ordinance is all over us because they have probably 9 or 10 drainage districts, and they have different rules there. In some of the areas like that in the municipalities, where you'll have one set of rules, but then if you're in the coastal zone, you have a different set of rules. So I didn't find anybody where they had an exact number with no evidence of mitigation, because you could mitigate every place, but they had net zero and a 100-year flood was most of the places where you had a flood.
So while we know that this is a political decision, it also has legal implications. Am I right about that?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Okay. If the number 3 feet comes up to be, it's found to be arbitrary, then you got a problem.
So we're going to work on all of that we'll ask you, O'Neill, to work with us as we develop this ordinance with Melissa and Sean and the members of this body and the public in these meetings, so that we are truly covering all our bases here. I think that was all I had. I just wanted to make clear that it is my expectation that we will be refining this ordinance over time with landholders, with residents, having input with FEMA requirements and future requirements coming into consideration. And I'd like to see it based on technical merit. I think it's going to be important for us, should we find ourselves facing the legal implications of this ordinance, that we have technical merit as our base. So that's all I am going to have to say about it. I'm the chair will entertain other motions, questions, comments. Mr. Kluwat.
Yeah, just, Madam Chair, you brought up some good points, and one of the better points that we talked about when in strategic planning, through a vote of the majority of the folks there, that last paragraph was removed. I didn't agree with totally removing it, but I agreed with the fact that we didn't want a general disclaimer at the end allowing special interest or special deals to be made. But I do think that we can work out just like you said, Terry, that we need some leeway to govern and make decisions, because two things I don't want. The last thing I don't want is a major, big conglomerate aborting the law. And the other last thing I don't want is a small business person and a person that's limited with a good resource and a service to the community or the parish to just be burdened to the point where it's not even worth putting in the application, because what Sean had brought up, and because we see this in other areas of applications, somebody reads the requirements of the application, hell, they back off. There's not a lot of discussion unless we can get them in touch with, Jerome does it on a normal basis. People saying, hey, you said you got to do this and you got to do this, so how does that pertain to me? You need that conversation. So we need some latitude there to be able to govern and manage that. And the truest statement, Madam Chair, is this will continue, and it's not just in this parish, but every parish that has ordinances is a living document based on history and what it takes to manage the floodplains that we have. And we don't have a new set of floodplain from FEMA. We're still running on, 2007 right now. But it's coming. It's just a matter of time once they get caught up. So we will be reviewing this probably every couple of years, small amendments and things. I appreciate the fact that when y'all presented it, that several council members went over it and looked at the dotting I's, across the T's, the mays to shall, things like that. So some of the things that we felt real strong about. And so it went through strategic planning, and out of strategic planning it's coming here tonight just for discussion. And it's already been some other things that people have looked at and, within this council want to change on it. And I'm sure before it hits us for introduction, it'll have some more. So, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Kluwat. Any further questions or comments? Mr. Dawson.
Yeah. Melissa, let me ask you, I read through this thing. Matter of fact, Doc said he and I spent 5.5 hours. The time must go by fast. I thought it was less than that, but.
Well, some of us did. Some of us had to leave and go elsewhere, but we won't say who that is, will we?
But in looking through it, Melissa, and maybe Jerome can also answer this, I didn't see anything that addressed somebody that put fill on their property and they weren't building a house. So can you tell me where I could find that?
Jerome? If I understand the question is that if somebody has a vacant lot and they just continue putting fill on the property without any...
and so where is it, what's in there to control that?
There is nothing in there that controls that right now. So we do not have a fill ordinance.
I called you about this today. We have a place on Cornerview that a person has piled up dirt across his property above a 6-foot fence on the side of it. Now, we have no idea where it's coming from. We have no idea what kind of compaction or anything else. We have no idea about how that's going to affect anybody's drainage that lives around it. Is that correct?
Well, when they come in for a building
permit... Well, what if he doesn't build a house?
Yeah, you're right. We don't have in the ordinance right now anything that limits people putting fill on their property.
I mean, this is an absolute hole in this whole thing, is that people come and they put fill on their property. Once they get it to the elevation they want it, then they come in and they get a permit and they say, here's my existing elevation. Just so happens to be 1 foot above the BFE. Don't pay any attention to that 10-foot mound I have out there.
Well, and at that point, when they come in for a permit, they have to file a drainage study that shows how they're going to mitigate the fill
what happens to these
that they
people
put on
that
their
live
property.
next door to this guy right now until he gets the permit? They have 6 feet of dirt piled up on their neighboring lot, all across it. And so what happens to that? How do we know they didn't block the drains in that whole existing subdivision?
Right.
Do we have any way of knowing?
Not until we have a plan
I
that's
don't
submitted to the
understand why we
parish.
didn't put this in there. I mean, it's something that Randy and I talked about for the last year.
We talked about it in every meeting.
Well,
I'll show you
anyway,
one
that's my
over 10
request,
acres.
that be a paragraph at least, or maybe a page or a section, but we need to do something to
We'll
control that.
entertain that
In the
dis-
floodplain, we can't have people in the floodplain that just come in here and dump trucks on it.
Okay. We'll entertain that, and we're looking internally about how to monitor that, whether it's monitoring the truck traffic, the amount of tickets that a truck operates. It's a difficult process.
Neighbors.
Yeah. Well, if we get a report, then
Yeah.
we can certainly investigate it.
That's it.
Okay, so you're not making that in the form of a motion now. Let's
Making
deal
that
with
in
our
the form of a strong request.
strong request. You got that? And we talked about that earlier today, Jerome and I. I said monitor on both.
And we could talk about that in the workshop, because this got
Absolutely.
dropped on us this evening, and it's been going on for how long, Randy?
Since 2015 in my area, probably been going on since 1915, okay?
Yeah, that's probably more
Real,
like it.
real, Madam Chair, if you'd allow me 3 seconds. I want
Absolutely.
to expand on what Mr.
Please,
Dodd
Mr.
said. We've
Kluwat.
talked about this in every meeting, okay? And Jerome, before you got here, into the parish, I'd say, that I was told exactly that. They're gonna see us when they come get a permit, okay? I got somebody that dug ponds and filled over 10 acres of land. Well, now they got 3 houses on it, okay? And nothing's changed for their neighbors. And there's probably every district that's sitting up here probably got at least one instance of that. So we just don't have that we don't have that ability legally right now, or an ordinance in place. And I don't want to stop the guy that needs a load of dirt because he's got a pothole in his yard, okay? So we got to find some way to work and find that. And we should have the smarts within the engineering corporations we got and professionals we hire in our staff to come up with something. Thank you.
That sounds like quite a challenge.
Terry.
All right, thank you. Yes, Mr. Lawler.
I'm going to piggyback on what Councilman Clark just said, because I was thinking about that, the people that need a little bit of dirt on their land, they've already got their house built, they're just filling in holes, or naturally, subsidence occurs. Our land subsides constantly. It's one of the problems we have living in Louisiana. Can we do something to the extent that we look at, if you have under 3 inches, that's a random number at the moment, just by example, 3 inches of fill over a 2-year period, that doesn't have to be, that's not subject to a permit. I mean, to me, if somebody's going to spend, try and get up 3 feet doing 3 inches a year, that's a losing battle. But we have to have some sort of exception for the people that Randy said that just, they need to get a load of dirt to fill in, that sort of thing. So just something to think about.
We could certainly look at that, and we'll come back.
'Cause I know you have nothing else to do. True.
Mr. Satterley?
Yes. Legal counsel tonight, in studying Houston, Calcasieu, Lafayette, et al., these areas that flood like us, mentioned 2 things, and I'm intrigued by both of them. The idea that he said they have, in a lot of these places, net zero fill in a 100-year flood, which means no fill. This is something I've talked about a lot and have charged HNTB with over the process of their making their recommendations. So that's obviously not in there. So is that in what's in front of us? So is that something, Madam Chairwoman, and I don't know, Jerome, Sean, Melissa, whoever, that we're going to still yet consider in these workshops? Or is that just something that legal found out about that we're just not going to be able at this late date utilize?
Yeah, I think Councilmember Sally, I think it'd be appropriate to explain what net zero fill means, and I think maybe Sean or Melissa can actually explain that process.
Please.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, net zero means is what Ascension Parish has. You offset your fill on your property with excavation or creation.
So it's a
of
mitigated
storage.
term.
So yes, you have to balance it.
Okay, so we are doing that.
We are
All right,
doing
number
net
2
zero.
then was based on different watersheds or zones, I think O'Neill called them. It's my understanding, talking to other engineering firms, that we have as many as arguably 5 or 6 watersheds. But I've heard it said before that HNTB on other work they're doing has just looked at one watershed. And so, again, is that something, Madam Chairwoman, or whoever wants to answer that, we're going to be able to, I mean, without further study, that would be a pipe dream to think in this current editing of our existing ordinance that we'd be able to actually say in this area, because that's something else I've been reporting. There's some areas where it's so undevelopable, you probably should be told you can't, or if you do, it could be no fill, and maybe you got to go up on pier and beam. And as I read this thing now, in the 5.5 hours, Mr. Dawson, that I spent, it truly did. It says 3 foot, and that's regardless of whether it's individual or a subdivision, and which is no longer called major minor subdivisions in the law. It's now called non-individual lots, non-individually owned. We just don't. We don't have any. You know, you have to do the 3 foot fill, and if you can't, you still got a BFE problem. You have to combine that with chain wall and or I like the word pilasters. Y'all call it pier and beam, which is the same thing. So, are we going to make any attempt at all to? And boy, I definitely don't want another study, but to try to identify these areas and maybe weave zone information into our ordinance, or is that just off the table?
Looking at that as part of the floodplain management plan that's been proposed, it just has not been contracted further. So that's included in that plan.
So we have an admission tonight. You know, Mr. Rue said years ago that I'm going to identify the floodplains in this parish, and I'm going to bring you the infamous words, a no-fill ordinance. And we don't have that in front of us tonight, and we're saying we haven't done that study. And boy, heaven help us, we don't want to tell the public we're going to now pay you or another firm a whole bunch more money to find out where they are and maybe incorporate some of the things that O'Neill said exist in Calcasieu, Houston, Lafayette, what have you. That I'm going to use Mr. Dawson's comment. That to me is still a big hole in this whole thing. But I agree with Mr. Pettit, the lone speaker tonight. Something right now is better than nothing, and also agree with both Randy and Terry, who have said this is a living document, and that down the line we can nurse and nudge it some more. But I can't see us doing anything with zones right now. We don't know where they are, and we don't know how to recommend within them, is what I'm hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Satterley. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Dempsey Lambert.
Yeah, I'd also like to thank everyone. I've been accused of dragging my feet with this, but look, I'm glad that everyone, and I appreciate all the committees that have taken this on. When you start messing with people's property and their lives, this is a little bit different. It's been stated it's been about 10 months. Ms. Kennedy, through all of the billing meetings, all of the meetings that we had, is this a good time frame, or are we running behind, or what would you recommend?
I'd recommend proceeding as indicated.
Okay.
And it has been, actually, it's been over a year.
Well, and that's you know, that's expected with this big of a change coming. I appreciate the workshops, but I think we're going to need more than one. And I hope you can put that together fairly quick. So thanks everyone for helping this go along, and thank you.
Thank you. So I have a motion by Councilman Dawson, a second by Councilman Satterley. If there are no further questions or comments, what's the pleasure of the body? Senator, will you open the voting machines, please?
Are you not got any opposition?
Just everybody vote. All right, so that is there was no opposition. I could have just made it simple and said that, but.
Point of order, Madam Chairman, are you going to
Yes,
vote?
I am. I thought I pushed it. I'm sorry, just didn't look for it to pop up. Thank you very much. All right. So, is there any further discussion on the discussion of approval and proposal of the revisions to the drainage impact study policy? Or are we going to, Mr. Dawson, did you?
Those were together.
Those were all
They're
together.
one agenda item, right?
Well, they were
No.
split, but
They're
that,
split.
there's an A and B.
Two
but
documents.
I think we can cover it all. Cinnamon, if you'll have that motion indicate that both are covered by all the previous discussion. And we'll move on to general business. Item number 9, approval to add roof repair to the scope of work for the jail budget of $800,000. Originally included only plumbing and electrical. Mr. Dawson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is just as it stated, 800,000 was for plumbing and electrical. Now we're adding roof repair. It's not any additional amount that's expected to the actual amount in the budget. This looks like, since we've been working with the sheriff office to do some changes in what we were going to do for repair of the jail, and now we're able to repair the roof within the same budget, which we anticipate.
Move to approve.
Wonderful. I have a motion by Todd Lambert, a second by Benny Johnson. They'd already gotten you, Bill.
Oh, good.
Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 10, a resolution to adopt the FEMA rates. Ms. Martha Collins, our grant officer, and Mr. Matassa.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the council. The wording was a little bit off, Mr. Dawson, but the reason why we said we do the, on my description, was FEMA rates. The legal, when I got with legal, we discussed it, and he put together the resolution that it deals with forced accounting, forced labor and materials and equipment. And so you have before you a resolution that Mr. Parrington put together.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion by Councilman Benny Johnson, a second by Councilman John Cagnolotti. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Thank you, Martha.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 11, CDBG Disaster Recovery Program through Restore Louisiana Infrastructure, FEMA Public Assistance Non-Federal Share Match Program. Martha?
Madam Chairman, this one is a follow-up to what the public assistance that Rick Weber's office, OEP, and also for the March and the August flood, we will be going to get the 10% or the matching funds.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion already by Councilman Dempsey Lambert, who just wasn't very loud, a second by Councilman Kluwat. Are there any questions? Mr. Dawson.
Well, I just have one request, Martha, if you will. I'd like to get at the next meeting what Restore has gotten for the Parish of Ascension and how much they've spent on their contractor that dispersed that money.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you.
Great
Good
question.
sir.
Yes, indeed.
I
I
think
wonder which
that
one's
one.
going to be greater.
I'd be willing to make a bet. Okay, so,
At the next council meeting?
please.
Please, is that possible?
Is it in April? Like the first weekend, first week?
Yeah.
You
Or the
want to do
second
it
one?
back over here, or you want,
Let me, give me a little time, because it.
Well, let's
might
do
just
the-
take a
let's
little
do the
bit.
second meeting in
second
April.
week. Second meeting,
The
please.
Gonzales meeting in April. So Dempsey, had a
Thank you.
motion by Dempsey Lambert, a second by Randy Kluwat. Any other questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Martha. Item number 13. 12, excuse me. I don't want to miss my own. Item number 12, approval for Ascension Parish DBW to install no parking signs along Alligator Bayou Road from the Fish Bayou project limits to the Ascension Iberville Parish line in preparation for the long-awaited Fish Bayou drainage project for public safety issues. I have asked for this to be done. I would appreciate the support of my fellow members. And Ron, do you have anything you want to elaborate?
No, sounds like you got it.
All right. I have a motion by Councilman Dempsey Lambert, a second by Councilman John Cagnolotti, and anybody who objects does not get to eat Christmas dinner.
I just a quick question.
Mr. Kluwat, be careful.
Oh, no, I'm with you. So, I just want to reiterate that both you and I are from the parish, and is this a temporary situation? Because that area has always been a good parking place.
Well,
It's a road.
it is a road, sir.
If you want to fish.
Thank you.
So is I-10. I will say you've got the alligator bayou locks, you got a gauge for Bayou Man Shack, you got frog bayou locks, you got a lay-down yard coming for Fish Bayou, and you now have Fish Bayou project.
I'm just joking.
So yes, ma'am,
Thank you,
yes,
sir.
sir, I think you need to support this one.
Thank you. Please, people, do not park on the side of this road. We appreciate it very much. Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Thank you, Ron, so much. All right, number 13, a resolution declaring the intention of the Parish of Ascension, State of Louisiana, to issue its water revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $9,678,000 for the purpose of paying a portion of the cost of constructing and acquiring improvements and replacements to the water system within the parish, to issue bond anticipation notes of the parish in an amount not to exceed $9,678,000 to provide interim financing for the project and providing for matters in connection therewith. Mr. Malcolm Dugas and Mr. Fink, welcome.
Good evening. Good evening, council members. This is a resolution for the funding of the interim financing on the water system project that is being totally funded through USDA eventually. But this is...
Have a motion by Councilman Benny Johnson, a second by Councilman Randy Cluott. Any questions?
Unfortunately, I need to read what you just read again.
Please.
A resolution declaring the intention of the Parish of Ascension, State of Louisiana, the parish to issue its water revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $9,678,000 for the purpose of paying a portion of the cost of constructing and acquiring improvements and replacements to the water system within the parish, to issue bond application notes of the parish in amount not to exceed $9,678,000 to provide interim financing for the project and providing for other matters in connection therewith.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Dawson.
I just have, one comment. I think it's $9 million in the, that we're going to borrow bond, and then there's $8 million associated with this that's grant money. So we're getting $17 million and borrowing $9 million of that. Is that generally true?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Great point, Mr. Dawson. Thank you very much. Are there any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you very much. Item number 14 was resolved as 7-4, and so we'll go on to an introduction of ordinances. Number 15, introduction of ordinance to declare surplus and authorize the sale and/or transfer of miscellaneous movable equipment. I have a motion to introduce by Councilman Lawler. Item number 16, introduction of an ordinance to amend the Ascension Parish zoning map from medium-intensity residential RM to mixed-use 2, MU2, lot TP1A, 1B1, and TP2A, being the re-subdivision of tract TP1A, 1A, and TPZ for Tom Pertwee, located on the north side of Louisiana Highway 429, Cornerview Road, approximately 4,500 feet east of LA Highway 73, zoning review ID PZ 1915-19.
Motion introduced.
Have a motion to introduce by Councilman Cluott. Item number 17, introduction of a motion to adopt the 2019 millages.
Motion.
Have a motion by Councilman Benny Johnson to introduce. Item number 18, introduction of an ordinance to revoke and relocate an existing 25-foot 20 servitude running along approximately 75 feet from the western boundary of tracts LJG1A1 and LJG2A, 1A, 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 2A of the former Colonial Sugars property, Ascension Commerce Center, fifth filing. Move to the council agenda via UDC 17-4050B2A.
Motion.
Have a motion by Councilman Randy Cluott to introduce. Moving on to public hearings. A reading of an ordinance, Budget Amendment 2, to amend the 2019 budget. Mr. Parrington.
An ordinance to amend the ordinance approving, adopting, and appropriating 2019 operating budget and capital budgets for the Parish of Ascension, adopted by Ascension Parish Council on the 15th day of November 2018. Section 1, the Ascension Parish Council hereby ordains that the ordinance approving, adopting, and appropriating 2019 operating and capital budgets for the Parish of Ascension is hereby amended, approved, and appropriated as follows. Operating budget, general fund, grants not awarded until 2019. Revenues, grant, the gap, $31,500. Civil defense, EMA, $93,000. Expenditures, OEP, Homeland Securities, appropriation and grants, 2018. SAJP, $60,000. Appropriations and grants, 2018. EMPG, $33,000. IS/GIS, appropriation grants, 2018. LAGAP, $31,500. Road and Bridge Fund, fueling station at DPW, expenditures and other financing uses, transfers out of Office Building Construction Fund, $35,500. East Ascension Drainage Fund, fueling station at DPW, expenditures and other financing uses, transfer out of Office Building Construction Fund, $106,500. Capital budget, Office Building Construction Fund, fueling station at DPW, revenues and other financing sources, transfer in from Road and Bridge Fund, $35,500. Transfer in from East Ascension Drainage Fund, expenditures, $106,500. Contract payments, $142,000. Dedicated Special Projects Fund, Steamboat Museum, project not finished in 2018 is budgeted. Revenues, intergovernmental grants, $849,000. Expenditures and appropriations and grants, $849,000. Park Construction Fund, gym project, design of 2 spray parks. Expenditures, engineering fees, gym project, $280,000. Design of 2 spray parks, $100,000. Total $380,000. Professional services, gym project, $20,000. Cash payments, gym project, $2.5 million. The ordinance has been submitted to a vote. The vote thereon was as follows.
Open public hearing.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to open the public hearing. There are no comments.
Close.
I have a motion.
Close by Oliver.
Motion by Councilman Oliver Joseph.
Second.
Second by Councilman Travis Turner to close the public hearing. I need a motion to move the ordinance.
Motion.
I have a motion by Councilman Oliver Joseph to move the ordinance.
Second.
Second by Councilman Aaron Lawler. Are there any questions? Any objections?
Object.
I have two objections. So, Madam Secretary, please open the voting. Thank you very much. The yeses have it, 8-3. That motion passes. Item number 22, a reading of an ordinance to amend the Unified Development Code, Chapter 9.5, Flood Damage Prevention, D ordinance as required for Lomar by FEMA. O'Neill?
To amend the Ascension Parish Code of Ordinances, Chapter 9.5, Flood Damage Prevention, whereas Ascension Parish Local Government Subdivision defined by Article 6, Section 44, Louisiana Constitution, 1974. Whereas Ascension Parish is the governing responsible body over flood damage prevention, whereas the Ascension Parish here desires to amend, Ascension Parish Council desires to amend Chapter 9.5, Flood Damage Prevention. Now therefore be it ordained the Ascension Parish governing authority that the Code of Ordinances of the Parish, Ascension Parish, Chapter 9.5, Flood Damage Prevention be amended as more fully described in Exhibit A attached to and made a party hereof. This ordinance shall be in full effect as submitted by law. The ordinance has been submitted to a vote. The vote thereon was as follows.
Open public comment.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to open public comment.
Motion to close.
This time, please, Mr. Sadler, there are speakers.
Oh,
I
sorry.
have several speakers, and I look forward to welcoming each of them to the podium. First, Ms. Angela Gautreaux. Hi, Angela.
Hi. I'm short, sorry.
That's okay. Me too. Turn it down.
Okay. Thank you for hearing my voice tonight. I think Mr. Lambert said it well earlier that you start messing with people's property in their lives, and it makes a big difference. And on February 20th, a letter was written stating that my property was now going to be moved into a floodway, However, I did not receive that letter until last week. So I do not feel like I was properly notified, being that that ordinance is supposed to take place May 15th. I don't feel that we were really giving any notice of the changes that come and ask questions on how those decisions were being made. You guys have focused on some things that I know that you have a lot to deal with, but recreation, I think that's a great thing, and you're planning for the 50,000 people coming, but what about us that are here? What about your loyal current residents that are now being told they've spent their whole life building their dream home that is now worthless? I'm not going to be able to sell it. If I flood, I can't rebuild. If a natural disaster happens, let's say hurricane, get hit by lightning, it burns down, I can no longer rebuild my current home. Yet I'm stuck with a mortgage that I still have to pay. I'm going to have to pay property taxes for land that's worthless. And I don't think that's fair. I need to know, I need some questions answered as far as what's going to be done for us that are being moved to this floodway in Conway, yet our property has never flooded. We've never come close to flooding. In 2016, I live on Bayou Conway. The water was barely out of the bayou into my yard. So I just feel like maybe the survey needs to be done a little more accurately, because the surrounding areas that did flood drastically were moved to better zoning. And they flooded. They had 4 feet of water, and we had none. My house is 15 feet above the flood stage. So I just feel that more attention needs to be given to this project and looked deeper into before you destroy lives of your current residents. For people and for businesses that aren't even here yet, money needs to be spent to help us, to help our drainage, and that's it, I guess.
You did fine, babe. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. We appreciate your
Yes,
comments.
ma'am, I appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Mr. Mike Gautreaux. Hi, Mike.
Who would agree with me, everything east of the airline highway was a floodway in 2016? Isn't that relevant? '76, the flood of '76, the flood of '83, the great flood of 2016 affected none of our houses back where we live. Hurricane Andrew, Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Gustav, none of that was an affected situation. But yet, I'm here to oppose this new flood survey. I do not agree with it.
We understand.
I know y'all were surveying Cluot Ditch a few years ago. What happened to that? Y'all were going to dig Cluot Ditch and make a better drainage than that with that project, but I haven't seen nothing else. That's been 2 or 3 years ago. Do any of y'all have any answers for that situation?
This is a public comment time, sir, not
Okay,
a question
well.
and answers. I'm sorry. But you can certainly reach out to your personal councilman for
Okay.
answers.
He
to
has
those
no
questions.
idea about that. I asked him that yesterday, and he has no answer with that situation.
I'm sure he'll get that for you.
And I just hope that y'all use some of this grant money in the future to help us out. Conway could use a little help. Conway and Panama Canal. I'm just here to voice my opposition. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chastity File.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
So I just scribbled on some papers in the back. I'm going to try to read straight from it to keep myself from getting emotional. Too late.
Emotions is okay. I've cried up here myself.
It's embarrassing.
No, don't be.
Okay, so we were not informed of this huge change in
Would you like to just enter your comments into the record?
It just affects my family too much.
Can we get an engineer out to do a letter of map revision? We were not informed of this until 2 weeks ago. We were not given the proper time to react appropriately. Also, the study done on Bayou Conway and our land is faulty. This is going to have a huge negative impact on my property, my future, and my children's future. Some satellite photos were taken, and that's supposed to be enough to make a decision to make my property worthless. The land that my family has been living in for almost 200 years. And by the way, the definition of a floodway does not apply to our land. The definition states that a floodway is land by a river that is likely to flood. My parents' home, grandparents, great-grandparents, and so forth have never flooded. A history has to mean something when predicting the water on our land. We cannot rely on satellite photos. This story needs to be redone, or this study needs to be redone and made a little more effort to get it accurate.
Thank you. Thank you, Chastity. Mr. Robbie Gotro?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for the time to listen to us. Mostly I echo what they say. My wife and I moved to Ascension Parish in 2011, but my ancestors moved to Ascension Parish in the 1700s. My great-great-grandparents relocated to Lafourche Parish, and my brothers, my family, we all moved back to Ascension, and we're happy to move back home, as we like to call it. We love our neighbors. We love our community. And it was a shot through our heart to be with such short time and awareness that, as they echoed, our property is basically worthless. We've saved our whole lives. We've invested. This is our greatest asset. And, you know, when I think about it, it's very upsetting and it's inaccurate. I mean, that's the greatest part is, as they said, these are public records. You can see if we flooded in 2016. You can see if our properties have flooded ever. And that's public record that is counter to what these measurements have been taken. So we just ask for accuracy. And we ask if something has changed, well, what has changed? You know, if for some reason today it's different than it was in 2016, or in all these other major events, what has changed? And if that has changed, whose responsibility does that lie on? Is it the council that has approved things that adversely affect our drainage? I hear most of what we spoke of today and you know, seem that is of high priority of this council to take into consideration drainage, floodway, and those things of new development. And we appreciate that concern for us and our current citizens. But is that something that has changed that adversely affects us? And as we talked about, you know, new residents moving in within the next decade. And we'd like to welcome them. But the reality is, you know, the old saying goes, one in the hand is worth two in the bush, is we can't neglect what we already have to seek out new, you know. And that's just kind of how we feel, and we feel it's logical that we're not just, even though we are emotional, we don't feel that all of our arguments are coming from a place of emotion, but history backs up what we say. So we appreciate you listening to us and hope you consider all these points. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And here, but not wishing to speak, was Susan Gotro and Missy Jackson. Thank you all for being here.
Motion to close public
I have a motion by Councilman Benny Johnson to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Cagn, second by Councilman Cagnolati. Mr. Dawson.
Well, Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we postpone this because, you know, these people didn't get proper notification. I've talked to just about every one of them. It's just not right. They didn't have the opportunity to protest. They didn't have the opportunity to put in public comment. They didn't have the opportunity to challenge this.
Have a motion and a second.
I move that we postpone this at least to the second meeting in April, and that we use that time. I've talked to the administration, and they're very supportive of this, and we use that time to convince FEMA that we need to at least at the minimum is to restart the clock, give these people time to protest, give them time to put their public comment in, give us time to evaluate the model to see, why they're showing them in this floodway when in fact they haven't flooded for years or sounds like centuries.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Are there any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Mr. Chairwoman?
Yes, Mr.
I just want to say, in talking with Mr. Dawson, I talked to Congressman Graves' office today about those questions, and they're going to be getting back to us on that with FEMA because of what's going on. So we will let y'all, inform y'all of what's going on and when we're going to have the meeting. Thank you.
Item number 25 is an executive session, Parish of Ascension versus Berkeley Insurance Company written demand. We'll need a roll call vote. Madam Secretary, will you open the voting machines?
Oh, got it.
Need a, thank you.
We're live.
Go ahead.
I don't need that field of drainage.
Chair would entertain a motion to
Motion,
reconvene. Motion by Councilman Benny Johnson, second by Councilman John Cagnolotti to reconvene. Chair recognizes Mr. Lawler.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize our legal counsel to take all legal actions necessary to pursue any and all claims arising out of any insurance, I didn't think about what it was about any insurance claims related to the discussion in the executive committee.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Mr. Cagnolotti. Are there any, well, we're not going to have any questions or comments because that is an executive session. So any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Motion adjourned.
I have a motion by Mr. Johnson to adjourn. I hope he and his wife have a lovely day.
Where you going, man?